good morning, students. We are starting economic development. This is from the section 5, and this chapter is very important. So, when we start this chapter, when we look at this picture, what do we notice here? That there is one boy riding a bicycle. There is a good infrastructure, and the other picture we can see a person is pumping water from the hand pump, and there are the women who are busy in agricultural work. So what do we notice here? So there is the example for the developed countries and the developing countries, which are rich in resources, a good infrastructure, and here they are lacking in the resources, struggling for the water and for the income. Learning objectives: we will focus on the development between the countries, and we will learn about the indicators. So developed economies are those economies which have the high income, and countries with the high standards of living and advanced industrialization and well developed infrastructure, just like UK, USA, European countries. So they are highly developed. They have high income per capita, means high income per person, and a significant contribution of the services and industrial sector to the GDP, means mainly they are based on tertiary sector and the secondary sector, but most of these services, their revenue, their GDP depends on tertiary sector. Low levels of unemployment and low poverty, means high living standard and high literacy rate. Most of the people are educated, and there is a good access to quality health care. These are the common characteristics of the developed economies. Developing economies like lower levels of the income per capita. Like developing economies are the countries that are in the process of industrialization, means the primary sector and the secondary sector, and have lower income levels compared to the developed economies. They often face challenges like lower levels of income per capita, means less income, a significant reliance on agriculture and the primary industries, means focusing on the primary sector and the secondary sector. Most of the people are employed in the primary sector and the secondary sector, and they got their GDP from these sectors. Primary means like agriculture, mine. High rates of unemployment and poverty, inequality, limited access to the healthcare, education, and infrastructure. These are the problems with the developing economies. Differences in economic development and their causes. Why these differences occurs and what are the reasons? The government does not focus on the industrial structure, healthcare and education factors, productivity, means resources are not organized well. Focus on consumption, the focus on consumption is more rather than investment. Differences in the population growth, there is no reforms for the education for the people to think about the education growth. They do not teach, like for example, population is increasing, mortality rate is increasing, or death rate is increasing, so which affects the economic growth of the country, because most of the resources are used in the healthcare. Differences in the income, more inequality, means there is a bad tax system, or there is less inequality. Richer is become richer, and rich is become richer, and poor is become poorer, and there are many other factors. Comparing the level of economic development in different economies. So This is the one individual activity you should see at home. Okay, you should see that which country do you think has the most developed economy. So how will we notice? Here we have the country A and the country B. So a country which which GDP depends more on tertiary sector is a developed economy. Which country do you think is newly industrialized or rapidly developing economy? Here country B is the rapidly developing economy because they are working on both primary and secondary sector. What do you think the chart of the country B could look like in 30 years? Like slowly and steady, their tertiary sector will pass the secondary sector and there is a chance they become the developed economy. Question 4, do yourself and see your answer. Compare your answer. There is the assessment, what we have studied. Pause the video, do these questions in your notebook. These are the MCQs for your revision. Development indicators. GDP, gross domestic product, is the one indicator of the well-being of the country. What is GDP? GDP is the measure of the country's economic development level, is the total value of its output or the GDP. GDP is actually the total amount of goods, total amount of goods and services produced in the country. Total amount of goods and services produced in the country. So what is real GDP? A country's economic development pace is therefore measured by the annual rate of change in its total output, or real GDP. Real GDP means without inflation. Real GDP means how much output is increasing. Real GDP means how much output is increasing. It doesn't mean how much prices are increasing. The value of goods and services is increasing. How do we calculate GDP? We calculate GDP by the income, GDP per capita. How do we calculate the GDP per capita? So we calculate GDP per capita by total amount of GDP in dollars divided by population of a country. Countries with the highest and the lowest GDP per capita, you can see GDP per capita, the highest GDP per capita and the lowest GDP per capita. So they are more prosperous country, rich country, earning more, people are having good living standards, who have the highest GDP per capita. How do we calculate GDP per capita? Just keep your GDP and the population and divide, you get the answer, GDP per capita. So we have GDP per capita, for example, for this year, then for the next year. So what we notice here, that there is a decrease in the annual growth rate. Now let's understand the Human Development Index. The Human Development Index provides a wide measure of living standards and economic welfare than the real GDP per capita. It combines the three different measures into a single index with a value between 0 and 1, and these three measures are living standards, education, and healthcare. Okay, Human Development Index is more wider, more meaningful, because GDP per capita tells you the how much income a person is earning in a country, and it is influenced by the rich person and also the poor person. So that's why HDI, Human Development Index, is more meaningful. because it includes the living standards and the level of education and the healthcare. So combining these three measures will help you to calculate the GDP, and the GDP value is always between 0 and 1. Okay, so living standards, if a person is earning high income, and the level of education measured by how many years on average age a person aged 25 will have spent in education, and how many years a young child entering school now can be expected to spend in education during his or her life. And healthcare, what is the life expectancy and what is the lifestyle. These are the details you can read. And these are the countries with the highest HDI. Norway 0.949, and the lowest like Central African Republic 0.352. And HDI depends on living standards, education, health, as we learn. This is the group peer activity you should do together and compare your answers. A small activity for you, for 3 minutes activity, just pause the video and do it yourself. These are the MCQs. Conclusion. So economic development levels vary significantly between the countries due to the differences in the factors like natural resources, infrastructure, education, and governance. Developed countries typically have a higher living standards categorized by better healthcare, education, and access to goods and services. That's why they are happy. Developing countries have the lower income level, less technology, and weaker institutional frameworks. Rules, laws are weak. Implementation is weak. Differences in economic policies and international trade opportunities contribute to disparities in growth and development. Enhancing living standards require targeted investment in education, healthcare, and infrastructure can boost the productivity and reduce the inequality. And a country can become the emerging developing country. Global cooperation, sustainable practices are essential to bridging the development gaps and improving living standards the worldwide. This chapter is very important, and is in exam they ask questions from this chapter, MCQs also in the cases. So please read the book. Thank you.